All right, good morning once again to everyone. The time now is 9:10, and I believe that we're ready to get started. So, good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today as we have our Applied Texas Advisory Committee meeting on this morning. We'd like to start with the welcome to know who's all here with us on today. So I'm Mordecai Brownlee. I serve as co-chair for this committee, Vice President of Student Success, St. Philip's College, Alamo Colleges. Rebecca.
Good morning. Rebecca Lothringer, Associate Vice President for Enrollment at the University of Texas at Arlington, and I serve as the four-year co-chair for the Applied Texas Advisory Committee.
Claudette Jinks, Director College Access here at the Coordinating Board.
David Muck, I'm a Principal Software Developer Analyst at the University of Texas at Austin and the Applied Texas Technical Team Lead.
I'm Graham Chapman with the Applied Texas Technical Team.
Miguel Washleski, UT Austin, Director of Admissions.
Dara Newton, the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, Associate Vice President, Strategic Enrollment.
Paula Redondo, Executive Registrar, Texas State Technical College.
Jamie Hansard, Interim Senior Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management, Texas Tech University.
Leah Hickman, Associate Director of Admissions, Midwestern State University.
And Zach Taylor, a lowly PhD student, University of Texas at Austin.
And for those joining us on the call, please introduce yourselves.
Tennille Richardson, Howard College.
Good morning,
Michelle
Andy
Walker.
Taylor.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Michelle Walker, Texas A&M University.
Hey, Angie Taylor, Director of Admissions at Sam Houston State University.
Monique Murphy, Applied Texas Technical Team.
Kevin Davis, Stephen F. Austin State University.
Madeline Tolliver, Victoria College.
Rebecca Griffith, Tarrant County College.
Christy Urban, Blinn College.
All right, is there anyone else joining us by phone? Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. At this time, good morning again to everyone. We'll get started here with Rebecca for B, review and adoption of minutes.
So if everyone will take a look at the packet that was provided for us by the Coordinating Board, within that packet we have minutes from the last meeting. If you'll take a few minutes to go through those minutes and make sure there are no corrections or to be ready to give us corrections, we will give you a few minutes to look at that, and then I'll come back and ask for any changes. Do we have any changes or corrections to the minutes that need to be made? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes as posted?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Accept the minutes as posted.
Thank you, Jamie. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dara. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Sorry, guests on the phone. I'll be a little bit slower. Any opposed, use the same sign. Very good. Minutes pass. Mordecai, back to you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So moving on now to updates for subcommittees. Strategic planning. Miguel, glad to have you with us on today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me again here. So we were able to meet with the appropriate committees. Claudette and I had a conversation with the full committee that reviews surveys here at the coordinating board. We had multiple surveys that were provided to them, and they had very, very good comments. And so we took their comments, went back and made a substantial amount of modifications to it, and all really, really good suggestions from them. We gave that back to them. There was a slight delay in getting it back, but we just got it back in February, the comments from them. So they I guess it would be seen as a final approval of what's on that survey. So we can now work towards getting that survey out and gathering the results. We originally had, I think, 4 different surveys, and we've combined them into one that will be used with some skip logic so that we don't have to manage multiple things. And there's a lot more consistency between the questions being asked of folks so that we can measure that, see what people have to feel about the Apply Texas application. We expect that to go to counselors, high school counselors, the college representatives, students, and parents, and we'll be giving that out probably, I would imagine, in the next few weeks or so we'll be able to release that, but I'll be talking with Claudette to make sure that we're following all the procedures for that. So that's a big step in us getting the information we need to be able to finalize a report. We do have Zach Taylor here today so that he can provide some of the information. It was requested that he basically give a summary of the information or the presentation that he gave earlier this year. And he'll also be here for some questions related to that. So I'll turn it over to Zach at the moment.
Great. Okay. Well, as we're getting that sorted out, you do have a printout of the Apply Texas Exploratory Research Report. I compiled that just about a year ago. I went through 4 of the major college application systems in addition to Apply Texas. Went through Common Application, Coalition App, Universal College App. I did not provide comparative information with the UC system app, the UW system app, and the SUNY system. I did go through those state application systems as well. I'm trying to get all that information together because the application systems are very, very different. But I kind of viewed the Common App, Coalition App, and Universal App as like the Apply Texas competitors. So that's why I looked at those 4 in particular. Some of the information in the report is just taken verbatim and put into the PowerPoint this morning. So if you want to explore some of that information on your own, you can feel free to do so. A lot of this research came from just working with high school students in Wisconsin and then in Texas, and kind of seeing firsthand some of their struggles through the application. And as a graduate student, when I applied to UT Austin, I used Apply Texas to apply as well. I thought it was a great application system, actually, and getting my PhD application finalized. But then after I went through Common App, Coalition App, and Universal College App, there are definitely some characteristics of those application systems that are very, very user-friendly and make the application systems very, very efficient. So I wanted to provide kind of a comparative analysis of those application systems. And I think does my remote work or no?
Hold tight, my friend. If I can read lips pretty well, it seems as though we are not being we're not broadcasting correctly. Is that okay? So just hold tight before we go right into that presentation, just to make sure it can be seen.
Absolutely, yep. And actually, if you want to just thumb through the exploratory report, and if you have any questions, that jump out at you, we'd be happy to take questions right now. That's totally fine.
For those on the call, Friday, you would have received this by email, so this would be in one of your attachments.
Zach, I know one of the questions that has come up in our discussion here is when you were doing your research with the Applied Texas application, which universities' applications did you use?
Yes, it was Texas Christian, and that was just a random selection, and I know that each institution has different questions that are added, you know, kind of like supplemental material, so that is kind of a delimitation of this study, is just using that one system, but then there are actually some pretty cool implications for research if I did have access to every institution's questions, which I could do. I could go through the application 250 sometimes or whatever and get all that information. But if it was in a standalone document, that would be really helpful. But to your point, yeah, it was just TCU, and that was a random selection.
And was it undergrad and grad that you researched?
Just undergrad.
Just undergrad?
Just undergrad, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want me to roll, Mr. Brownlee?
No, we have this way. I can see it.
Everyone, my apologies, my microphone was not on. We're going to, Claudette is walking back there to the media booth just to make sure that we're ready to move forward. So if everyone can just hold on for one moment. Thank you. And Zach, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have another question.
Yes.
So since we use TCU for Applied Texas, did you also use these other applications with TCU to have a comparison across the board?
No, so in those application systems, you don't have to select your school right away. You can fill out most of the application without selecting a school. So before any of the submission of Common App, Coalition App, Universal College App, all those specific questions are at the very end. So that was just a random selection of schools. I didn't use TCU for all three application systems because TCU doesn't take the Universal College App.
Right.
So it was just a randomly selected school.
But you did go through the questions at the end for the ones that you selected,
Yes,
correct?
exactly, yep. Yep.
I have another question, Zach. How did residency factor in when you were looking at all the applications related to like Texas residency and those pieces?
Yep, I just did Texas residency for everything, just as if I was a Texas student looking at undergrad institutions and exploring schools.
Miguel, I have a question for you. So now that we have went from 4 surveys down to 1, is there a proof of that one survey in its draft form available for us to view on today?
There is. I can forward it on, whatever's the appropriate method to, I can send it to Claudette. I mean, it's basically the last one with some corrections, but I'll send it to her and she can distribute it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Are we good to go, Claudette, or are we still waiting?
Yes. So it appears that.
This is Rebecca Griffith. I just wanted to point out I've got the link open to watch the meeting, and it's saying that it's going to start at 11 a.m.
Yes, and that was
live in 96 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was notified, and that's what we're trying to fix, actually. Just so you all know, there's a couple of staff members out sick today, ISS staff, so they're kind of helping us as best they can. We have identified that that's an issue. We also know that if you go to YouTube, the broadcast is streaming currently. I think there's a correction that needs to happen with the link that's posted to our website, and I think that's the problem. And they're fixing that right now, is what I've been told. I'm getting emails as well, and so there's some miscommunication. I don't know where they're correcting. From what I heard, they're correcting the issue, so we could. That's probably the reason why it's not broadcasting, because of the timing. But I think they're correcting that issue now.
Are we okay to move forward, Claudette, or are we waiting till 11 o'clock?
No, we're not waiting till 11 o'clock. We need to go keep going. The only thing is I don't know if it's recording. And that's the biggest piece, broadcasting and recording, because we're obligated to do both. So that's why we have to wait.
We want to wait, okay.
Not until 11, but we're just working out the details right now. I need to get a go from somebody who's going to text me shortly, I hope.
Claudette, this is Rebecca Griffith again, would it be possible for you to email out the direct link to YouTube? Because when I'm just searching in YouTube, I'm not finding it.
They said we are streaming, and I'm going to try to see about sending out this link to the current committee, but we can keep going. Sorry?
If you search for Apply Texas Advisory Committee, you should find it. That's how I found it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Right, the coordinating board has its own channel, and so you're able to find it if you Google Applied Texas Advisory Committee. You should find a link that's live broadcasting currently, and we are streaming right now. So we can continue the meeting.
We can.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Zach, again, thank you for your patience, and we will continue with Zach on this report.
Great. Okay. So if you can advance, you can just advance the entire slide through to the very bottom. Great. Awesome. So in this kind of comparative analysis, I looked at Apply Texas versus those other 3 large national level application systems. And what I did is page by page, I extracted text to calculate how long the application was by word count. I also, just using my desktop computer, started a timer. I had written down a fake student profile so that I wouldn't have to think about what information I would input to the application. So I had the same fake student profile created so I could start the application from beginning to end, and I calculated how many minutes it took me to complete it based on the fake profile that I had created to complete each application, the length of the application by number of clicks. So every single time I had to fill in a form, I had to select a state of residence, I had to select a school. Every single time I clicked the mouse, I logged that. I took the text at the very end of the application and calculated the readability of the entire application text. Whether or not the application had been translated into any other languages. There were some exploratory materials that some institutions had provided for the common application that were translated, but most of the application systems were not translated. I also completed the same process on my smartphone. So I was using an Apple iPhone 6s smartphone to see if the application was mobile optimized. And if it was, I went through the application through mobile optimization of that application. If it was not, I went through about the first half of it, and I would have to kind of zoom in and type in a fillable field. So it was much more cumbersome if it wasn't mobile optimized, but I did do that with my iPhone and then with an iPad. I also used TNON web accessibility software to understand if the application was web accessible for students with disabilities. So as Title IV institutions, as a public governmental entity, all of the communication must be WCAG 2.0 standard compliant, which is written into the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I wanted to make sure that the application was also accessible for all students and all learners. And then I made a few other notes which may inform a better understanding of how each application system was subtly nuanced and different. And I wanted to add one quick caveat at the very bottom. If you could just type in, we'll click one more time forward. There you go. These are all current as of spring 2019, last application season. So I did not complete this process this application season. So just understand that any improvements or modifications to any application system may not be completely accurate to now. So moving forward, next slide, just descriptive stats of all 4 application systems. So Apply Texas was longest by word count and most difficult by readability level. However, it was a little bit less clicky than the common application, although it did take me the most time to get through Apply Texas compared to other applications. None of them were translated. Apply Texas was the most web accessible. That's partially to do with there are far fewer external links in Apply Texas. The common application, you have many different links to different resources that students can explore. Apply Texas is actually a pretty tight website in terms of how many options students have to navigate away from the application. And the more hyperlinks, the more web elements you have built into a website, the more opportunity you have to be web non-compliant. So Apply Texas was the most web accessible application. At the time, was not mobile optimized, whereas the Common App and Coalition App were optimized, both for my smartphone and for the tablet, which made it a lot easier to get through those applications. You can go on to the next slide, and you can click all the way through. That would be great. Thank you. Readability levels, I triangulate 4 different readability levels to calculate overall grade level readability. We're all kind of codified back in the 1970s and 80s and have been cited literally tens of thousands of times, so they're pretty accurate to give you a baseline measurement of grade level for English reading comprehension. So for instance, if a text is computed at a 13, it would take roughly 13 years of English language instruction for a native English speaker to read and comprehend that material to 75% comprehension. So going back to the last table, and that's in your printout as well, anything over the 14th grade reading level would be considerably difficult for an average high school student. And to give everyone some context about literacy levels in this country, the average U.S. adult reads and comprehends at about the 7.5 grade or 8th grade reading level, which is why magazines like Us Weekly and People are very accessible to a wide audience and are very widely read because they are written at about that 8th grade level. The Common Application and Coalition app did not require social. I know that Apply Texas does not as well. I was a little bit unclear about that as I went through with Apply Texas. I can't remember or not if in that fillable form, it asked me if it was required in parentheses. I'm not sure if it was, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I did know that for sure the Common App and Coalition app, I could complete the entire thing without entering my Social Security number. The Coalition app was the only one to include a tutorial at the very beginning. It actually prompts you if you want help with the application. It was a little short kind of video that brought the application time to 45 minutes. All the applications were completed using high-speed Wi-Fi. Another point I want to mention about that, though, is that 300 megabytes is pretty fast, and in some rural areas of Texas, internet speed is just not accessible in some of those areas. So depending on how large by megabyte or megabit the web page is, it might be a lot more difficult to actually advance from screen to screen. So something I wanted to bring up is understanding how small each page could be and how quickly students could actually get through the application by internet download speed time. I think that's an important thing to understand. There have been a couple studies that have explored different levels of Wi-Fi speed in urban areas, and in areas with slower Wi-Fi speed, it tends to be low-income communities of color who have been historically marginalized from higher education. So understanding that internet speed in these processes does matter, and understanding that not all students have access to the same quality of internet. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all applications, if you can click one more time, all applications were analyzed using TNON, and I linked that there. It's a really robust web accessibility software. It's used by thousands of businesses and institutions of higher education across the country. If you can advance, thank you. Just in-depth statistics in terms of web accessibility, and I also have this report. There were 97 web accessibility errors on the landing page. Not all of those would entirely restrict access to the application, however. So there were WCAG 2.0 level AA errors that does make the application non-compliant with ADA. However, that doesn't mean a student using a certain assistive technology could not get through the application. It's just that the software found that there was missing bits of information in that application and in that landing page. One of them was just adding an informative text to hyperlinks. So one of the errors, and I have the Apply Texas application pulled up on my computer right now, there's a menu item on the very top that says About Apply Texas. All of those hyperlinks should have a description of what the link is and where the link would lead a student. So the hyperlink should be titled About Apply Texas with some kind of informative title, and then descriptive text about, if you click here, you can learn more about the Apply Texas application. There needs to be 2 pieces of information embedded into the metadata of that link, and there was some missing metadata in those links. So again, a lot of those errors would not restrict access to the application, but if a student with a disability was using an assistive technology and could not access that information, it would likely be deemed non-ADA compliant. And there are hundreds of ADA compliance lawsuits across the country right now, institutions of higher education not facilitating equal access to information for that population. So just something to be aware of. If you can continue. Yes, the landing page, this is just the readability stats of the landing page. Although there aren't many sentences on that landing page, all of them are pretty long. For instance, one sentence I'm reading right now is off of the landing page for Apply Texas. It reads, essay prompts for U.S. freshman and international freshman applications for enrollment in summer 2021, fall 2021, and spring 2022 have been posted and are unchanged from the previous application cycle. That is a very complex sentence that reads at about the 19th grade reading level. So just that one sentence on that landing screen might be really difficult for a student to read and comprehend. But as of last year, so as of 2019, it read at about the 15th grade reading level, 14.6th grade reading level. If you can continue. This is information taken, just wordy items and instances of passive voice inside the Apply Texas application itself. So the software that I use is called Readability Studio. It's a really robust kind of quantitative linguistic software program that I took all the text from the Apply Texas application, I uploaded it into Readability Studio and then ran kind of some summary stats, and it picked out all the wordy items. So just one quick suggestion, changing the word create to make, additional to added or extra, program to plan, required to needed. It tries to find the most simple synonym for those complex words, and it suggests alternatives. So that would be a really easy way. I did a kind of replacement experiment, taking all of those wordy items and actually using the simpler synonyms, and it actually decreased readability by about 2 full grade levels. So it, those individual words do matter. It can definitely make the application more readable. On the right-hand side are just instances of passive voice, and generally when you use passive voice in a sentence, this is going to be a little bit of grammar nerdiness, but you have to use an extra auxiliary verb and generally another conjunction or a preposition to connect the subject and the verb in a sentence. Long story short, using passive voice tends to add 2 or 3 words per clause, which if you stretch that over a 400-sentence document, you're getting into thousands of extra words that you don't need in a sentence. So writing in active voice is generally preferred. It's not always feasible to write in active voice, but I did do a replacement study on this information, and writing in active voice did decrease the reading level by about 1 grade for the entire application. So combining these two techniques of replacing wordy items and then changing passive to active voice, I was actually able to shave off 3 full grade levels for the application. So that would have brought it down to about the 11th grade level, which might have been more appropriate for prospective undergraduate students using Apply Texas. You can move on to that. Yeah, you can click all the way through. Thank you, miss. There we go. Other notes, I did take token type ratios. That's a measure of kind of word diversity, lexical diversity in an application. If you're writing a sentence back to back, something like, I like college, that token type ratio would be 100% because those words are used multiple times. You want to have a higher token type ratio, closer to 100, means that you're using a less diverse lexicon in your writing. And Apply Texas had the lowest token type ratio out of all the application systems. It was also the longest, though, so there's that additional caveat. The Common Application, I thought was very clever. It uses a similar software that Google Docs and Google Drive uses, that it automatically saves your process every single fillable form you complete. So those fillable forms detect text in that field and saves that progress automatically. And as of 2019, when I was completing Apply Texas, you had to click to save, and your information wasn't automatically saved. So that was one I thought really interesting and really useful like technological aspect of the Common App, is that it saves your progress as you go, which could be helpful for students to kind of persist and complete the application. Internet speed may greatly affect the time it takes to actually complete the application, especially on mobile devices when Wi-Fi speeds are not as strong as like home Wi-Fi speeds. And Apply Texas was not mobile optimized, so there was lots of bringing up my phone, using my fingers, pinching and zooming in, and then clicking on a form, and then zooming out, scrolling down, zooming in, clicking on a form. It was really, really cumbersome to get through the first few pages on a cell phone. I'm not sure if that has been mobile optimized now, but as of completing the application, it was not mobile optimized. If you can continue. You can click through all those. So possible future research that I was just kind of brainstorming, and I've talked to Miguel about a little bit, is just, and to your point, Rebecca, about what institutional material I used, having access to every single institution's questions specifically to the application, I would be able to calculate the mean and standard deviation of how complex the questions are and how long the questions are by word count and by click. And then I could provide those institutions with baseline measurements about, here's what the average school in Texas is asking by readability level, word count, and click, and then providing metrics to that school about, you are this much more difficult or this much longer by word count or by click from school to school. So schools would have an understanding of how difficult their questions are to read, comprehend, and click through compared to other institutions. That would be fantastic, and I could do that literally in probably 48 hours and have that back to you. Networking with all the diverse language populations in Texas as our systems continue to diversify. I really strongly believe that polylingual websites are kind of the future of higher ed. I have a colleague, Chris Doran, at the University of Virginia, the flagship, and they just translated natively all of their financial aid websites into Spanish and into Chinese, and he worked with native speakers on campus, actual undergraduate and graduate students, to translate all that material. You're slowly starting to see translated websites. Washington State University as well translates their entire financial aid website into Spanish, working with those language populations so that everyone has access to that information. The common pushback I've heard is that students ought to be able to speak English to attend English predominant institutions. However, we know part of the college selection process and exploration process intimately involves parents and support network members. So college communication in many ways is not meant just for students, it's meant for their entire support network and family. And if we're not speaking in the language of those support networks and families, we're gonna kind of continue to kind of ignore all the rich diversity they bring in terms of their linguistic identities. I'd also love to do A/B testing with students, asking them to complete Apply Texas on a computer and then complete Apply Texas on a phone, and have different kinds of students apply using different application processes, just kind of usability. I'm not sure if that work has been done, but I think it'd be fascinating to actually witness a student go through the application process using different technologies and see what works for students and what doesn't, and what they feel is cumbersome and what they feel could be improved. You can keep going. Yep, you can click through that entire. One more picture there. There we go. So possible paths forward: mobile optimizing the application, translating it, and making it web accessible. Auto saving by fillable forms, so students don't lose progress if their internet connection cuts out, etc. Understanding where students click and then what pages they hover on for the longest. That would be a proxy of application difficulty. If we know that students can get through the first 3 pages, but something on the 4th page is longer and more cumbersome, understanding where students kind of get tripped up would be really, really helpful. Doing something, I envision Apply Texas being a smartphone application, like a downloadable app. That way students could download Apply Texas and then create a profile, like as they would create a Facebook or an Instagram profile. And then institutions and the coordinating board could actually push information to students, not through email, through their smartphone, and engage them in the application process. For instance, if we knew that hypothetically, the 4th page of the application is cumbersome, and a student stopped out of the application on that 4th page, the Apply Texas smartphone app could actually push them a notification to say, hey, we noticed on page 4 you stopped out. Do you need any help? You can contact, some sort of push notification to help a student persist through the application. And then on the back end, if it was a smartphone application and a student is admitted to a school in Texas, that institution could provide a really customized, nuanced admission decision message to that student, reaching them, where they are on their smartphone. That could be really, really special, make it really personalized, really unique, and I think it would really help yield and keep students in Texas. Integration with other data systems. We know that students are putting information onto so many applications, and that students are also asked to complete other applications as part of their college onboarding process. Don't know if it's possible, but getting API access to other application systems so that the Apply Texas app could integrate with other applications and actually extract personal information and autofill it into the Apply Texas application. Don't know if that's possible, but that might be trying to kill more than one bird with one stone. And then voice commands, integrating more kind of advanced technology. Could a student, be prompted to complete the Apply Texas application on their smartphone using voice commands, going back and forth with Siri or something like that. There's also a few smartphone apps. They're mainly fast food apps, like the Zaxby's app. One of my favorite apps is the Zaxby's app. And Zaxby's, when you sign up for a profile, you can actually have them send you text messages, and they can ask for your information. So they might ask for your email address. You can text Zaxby's your email address, and that gets integrated into your Zaxby's app profile. So imagine if a student started Apply Texas on their smartphone, and they could text back and forth with the application. The application could ask them, what high school are you going to? The student could type in their high school, text it back, and it would autofill into the application. That would change the game in college applications and college admissions, because students would be having that conversation. It would be very personal for them to go back and forth with the school. Although I'd love to ask students about that. Would that be too intrusive? Would students not be into that? But I think it'd be a really interesting thing to explore. So that is the end of the presentation, and I did work a little bit with Miguel in talking about some of this information and sharing this with you last summer. I don't have a lot more to add other than this, but I have explored, like I said, other state-level application systems. The UC system application was recently updated a little bit, as was the SUNY system application, but if I can take any questions related to anything in this report, and if you have any questions about what I've seen in other application systems, I would be happy to comment and take any questions. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Taylor. So many thoughts are swimming through my head right now. First question, when you presented this information previously, just for all on the call and all that are here with us today, who did you share that information with, and when did you share that information?
Yep, so after I completed this report, I sent this, I think, to Sarah, so Miguel's assistant at UT Austin, prior to the last summer's meeting. And in terms of this kind of proprietary research, this is not published. I have specifically not sent this to a journal. This has not been disseminated publicly in any ways other than sharing it internally with Miguel and the Apply Texas team. So this is not part of a paper or a research project. This is just strictly for this group.
Understood. And Miguel and anyone else that's had this information, can you all share with the body what has been done with this information since it's been shared and received?
Well, so it's just been shared with the committee, with the subcommittee, and the idea is to provide a thorough analysis based upon not just this report, but also the survey that we're sending out to folks. So the idea is that this ends with a report that suggests all the different pieces of information we've been able to obtain, and then that gets provided to the committee for recommendations.
Understood. Additional thoughts?
I have a question again for you, Zach.
Yeah.
Based on the research that you've done, I'd really like you to go back through and bullet for us the things that you think we need to do to Apply Texas to get us up and equal or slightly above. I know you have some really innovative ideas, and I love them. But what do we need to do with Apply Texas at this point to actually make it the premier user-friendly application that you saw?
Yeah. First, mobile optimize it and make it a little shorter. It would be really, really helpful before giving any kind of concrete action items to have access to everyone's supplemental questions as part of the application to give them a baseline of what they're actually asking. Because in going through it, I remember when I presented over the summer, going back through the application, I explored a few other schools. I went through like Sam Houston's, UT, a couple of other different schools, and the questions are pretty different from school to school, and that would add quite a bit of difficulty depending on where a student's applying. So in an ideal world, it would be mobile optimize it, making it a little bit shorter, making sure that those fillable forms auto-save so that students don't lose their progress. So auto-saving the application. And then trying to norm as best as possible and standardizing the application. I hate to say that because I know that institutions want to ask their own questions because they have very specific enrollment management processes that they need certain pieces of information. But if the application really was as standardized as possible, I think students would be able to get through it more quickly because they wouldn't have to have different pieces of information depending on each school they're applying to. I know that's kind of like painting with a very broad brush, but there's a reason why the Common App has been so successful is because it is, I would argue, the most standardized application, and that if you complete it, you are basically going to spit that out to as many schools as you want, and that's it's really powerful. And Apply Texas has the same capacity. It's just that the little bit of hurdle is all of the institutional nuance in the application. So it kind of to summarize, mobile optimize, save those fillable forms, and then try to consolidate and standardize as much as possible, or as much as folks are willing to kind of negotiate on.
Additional thoughts?
So this is Rebecca Griffith on the phone, and I wondered if you looked at the state of North Carolina at all. For those of you that don't know, the state of Carolina has a statewide application, but in addition to that, one of the things that makes it a more seamless and uniform experience for the students is that the state determines residency, not the individual institutions. So I wondered if you looked at that application tool. It's actually run by like the foundation of North Carolina, but it's the state of their state application.
Yeah, as I'm looking at it, is it the College Foundation?
Correct.
CFNC.org?
Uh-huh.
Great. I basically prioritized application systems by size. So I was looking at really large systems like the UC system and Texas, obviously. I would be happy actually to do an analysis of this website as well and this application system. To me, it doesn't look very web accessible. There's a lot of links. The font is very small. It doesn't look that navigable, but if there is something that is in that application system that should be usable or could be usable, I'd love to explore it. And does that go to all, is that all publics in North Carolina?
That is correct.
Wow, okay.
And again, one of the reasons why we ask some of the supplemental questions is because the state mandated residency questions do not cover all scenarios, in particular, those dual credit scenarios. And in fact, the application doesn't do a whole lot to address dual credit scenarios. And that's becoming more and more a big part of our admission processes, especially at community colleges.
Agreed. Any additional thoughts?
I just wanted to share it. To your point about notifying students if they're stuck on a page of an application, that currently is in existence in the counselor suite. So the counselor, again, it's whoever has access to the student level data, but there is already an existing piece where if a counselor were to see a student was stuck on a certain page of the application, it's there for them by student, by each institution. But I do like the idea of the push notifications. That would be definitely an enhancement to talk to the student about that, because that information's already there.
Absolutely. And to your point about that, there have been some really cool studies that are starting to look or interview high school counselors and college counselors at that level. And with a caseload of like 350 to 400, the human capacity to go through applications. So to at least augment the human resources, absolutely. Like when you're stuck, not having to rely on the,
And the agency did a while back consider the auto population and from FAFSA information. There was some discussion in early work several years ago on that, so they had explored it. I think it just dropped because due to funding availability or exploration of funding. But I do know that there have been discussions about that as well.
okay, cool.
I also wanted to add that colleges also have access to see where a student has stopped in the application process. So it is left up to the individual college and universities, but many of them have communication plans that go out and remind a student that they have started an application but haven't completed it. So that's also available. It's just, I agree with you too. I love push notifications, and I think that would be fantastic. And Claudette's right about the FAFSA. We've also talked about College Board, integrating with College Board so that students can automatically reach out and get their test score sent.
Yeah.
There's been some discussion there about the pluses and minuses of bringing in basically a for-profit organization into our application. So that's where that's kind of stopped at the moment.
Okay.
For the record, I'll say what a bit of my thoughts were in regards to, thank you for the presentation.
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
Yeah, the great presentation, great information. I hope that us as a body, that not only do we just take this presentation and internalize it, but that we actually build some urgency very quickly around it. As we all know, or should know, the census is for 2020 is getting ready to go live here in about, I think, less than 40 days at this point. Materials begin to be mailed to the homes about March 15th-ish, and will continue for quite some time. And I know I serve on a complete count committee for the census, and so it's given me an opportunity to be exposed to some interesting census information and looking at trends as we look to close the gap on completion for census. I'm bringing this up because as we look at the trends that are shifting in our communities here just within the state of Texas, as well as where we're projected, bless you, where we're projected to be in the next 10 to 20 years, it is so important that now is the time that we begin to look at our language, look at potential barriers in design towards academic attainment and achievement, and we begin to talk about social mobility and equity and closing those equity gaps, that we begin to look at these systems like this that we have in place that are essentially creating barriers, not only for those that are looking towards social mobility, but certainly for within our institutions as we look at wanting to increase the FTICs, wanting to create more opportunities for folks to have continuing education if it is for a community college or something of that nature. And so it's very timely. I'm hoping that from an urgency standpoint, perhaps colleagues, please kick in what we can do. I know that we've got the survey that's about to roll out. Miguel, I believe that you're emailing that information to Claudette, so I look forward to seeing what the language is on that. But I think that in order for us to be a part of the change that needs to happen within the state and our institutions, that we need to figure out how to create a plan of urgency and development towards just leveling off the readability, right? That's just one start, right? Along with the mobile use, right? Along with these other things, not only to make us more competitive looking at another entity, but to just meet the demands and the charge of our communities and their needs.
And to your point earlier, Mordecai, this presentation was this past summer, so it's been a while. So we know there's been some development with the new rollout of Apply Texas and AWS, which we'll be hearing from later on today. So there might be some things that might be addressed. And then there's also the survey that we're continually looking at how to improve the application. So I think we're making some good directions in the right direction anyway. But I'll go ahead and turn it over back to you guys.
This is Michelle. I just had a comment. It seems to me that we really need to look at changing our model for Apply Texas, where we get in line with some of the other apps and we do the common info first before you have a student choose a school. So that would allow the student to fill out about 75% of the app before they have to answer the questions related to an individual school. And it seems like if we were to go to an Apply Texas app model, which I think was really interesting, you would have to do it that way, it seems, rather than having students choose their school first and then begin to fill out the app. So I was just wondering if we're moving in that direction or if that's still a decision that's yet to be made.
So we're definitely looking in that direction. Several of these are recommendations that we need to talk about as a committee and make a game plan. So I'll start with just a couple of concrete clarifications. We're going to hear more from David. So first, the SSN is on the current application something that people can fill out. It is not a required element. I know there's been some confusion about that. And the sort of low-hanging pass of this, like making this more accessible, easier to use on a phone, doing autosave on the forms, those are all things that we're working on for this current cycle that we're putting up this summer. Things like rearranging this to have more of a profile, getting the language more in control, looking at a phone application or whatever, translating, those are things that require a lot more investigation. So certainly the part of this that can have an immediate impact, we are incorporating into this current cycle.
Great. And, Mr. Brownlee, to your point about talking with our communities and making the application the best for Texans, something that Miguel brought to the table was doing these surveys and actually, asking students, parents, counselors, what do you actually want? And in networking with other enrollment management folks in other states, there doesn't seem to be that community outreach to get any kind of input into the application. So the foresight in doing that is excellent. So I think when the app does roll out, having, actual stakeholders, parents with kids who are going to apply to schools in this state, what's best for them, that's fantastic. And I've heard of no other state that does that, to my knowledge. So that's a really excellent competitive advantage.
Any additional thoughts? Awesome. Thank you very much for this information,
Yes, sir.
sir. Greatly appreciated. Now it's time for a subcommittee update with the communications team, so I'll jump right into that. So at our last meeting, there was conversations about the development of a subcommittee communications team, which, for the sake of a title, I'll say chaired by myself. And then we had some other team members, colleagues that decided to participate as well. Ms. Dara Newton, Jamie Hansard, and Rebecca Lothringer. And so together we've been in communications over the past several months working with Claudette and having conversations to make sure we had census as a group as to what would be our next step forward. So Miguel, that kind of goes into my question about the survey, because us as a subcommittee, what we were looking to do to support the work of the survey was looking to build out, I'll say, a template, if you will, but to make sure that what gets emailed out, that we have some information that's being shared to the constituent as to the purpose, our commitment towards creating a better experience, Apply Texas experience, and making sure that there was just some supportive language to go along with the introduction of the survey to make sure that we're providing a sense of purpose behind and value add to it. So that's what we all agreed that then would be our first initial value add to the committee as a subcommittee to create that. So we look forward to partnering with you and working with Claudette to see. I think that Claudette in the midst of the past few weeks had been working with her constituents to find out a means in which there would be a usable template that will be of use, that we can easily insert and begin to distribute in addition to, along with your survey. Subcommittee members, is there anything else that you all would like to add?
I think one of the other things that we discussed, and it's already been addressed, which is great, is that we discussed the need of 4 surveys versus 1 to make it more standard across the board. And so I was really glad to hear that it's come down to 1 survey.
All right, so that is essentially our report. Are there any questions about any information that I've shared? All right, very good. Now we're going to move over to Ms. Paula Arredondo, Texas State Technical College, Harlingen, in regards to the logic of residency questions.
Good morning. Thank you. So the committee met on February the 12th, and we evaluated the request to add the 3 additional questions regarding residency that would help institutions evaluate and determine residency when it comes to parent information. After we evaluated not only the questions, we also evaluated the logic when it came to the assessment. It was determined by the committee that we could not find any issues. As a matter of fact, we felt that adding these questions and making them mandatory would actually benefit the student and provide more clarity when it came to residency determination. So the committee agreed and approved to add these 3 questions. That's it.
Go ahead, Rebecca. Go ahead.
Paula, could you remind us of the 3 questions?
Yes. So the 3 questions were pretty much, when it came to parents, it was asking them to, when it defined where did they live in Texas, how long had they lived in Texas, and then it asked additional questions about, I believe their job was one of them. I think it was employment.
Establishing a business, I believe.
Establishing a business. Do you have those 3 questions by any chance? I'm sorry to put you on. Okay.
Oh, they're in the spreadsheet.
They're all related to the parents' establishment of domicile in Texas.
Is there any additional conversation, actions that need to occur at this time? Go ahead, Claudia.
We're going to be talking, so it seems like the subcommittee has approved that. We'll move that to item agenda E. It's up for discussion at that time, so you guys can vote all at that time on all the other items as well. So now that we have the update from the subcommittee that that's what's wanting to move forward, David will bring it up and you guys will vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all. Now we're going to move over to Rebecca for item D, update for Applied Texas Technical Team.
And I'm actually going to ask the committee at this time if they would like to take a break, as we know that this next section tends to take a little while. I think we should. I'm seeing some yeses. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, so we'll be back at 10:16. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone, it is now 10:16. Our technical team, are we good to continue? Just making sure we're still good to go. Awesome. All right, we're going to turn this back over to Rebecca.
Thank you and welcome back. The next item on our agenda is the update from the Applied Texas technical team. So David, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Thank you. I'll just start with our two recurring requests. If anyone would like to participate in additional daily application deliveries, please reach out to our help desk. And we also want to encourage more high schools to participate in the transcript request service that we maintain in collaboration with the TEA. For the incomplete fall 2020 semester, so far we're down 1% on submitted applications from the same time last year. We did complete the request to auto-populate parent address 2 with the same address as parent address 1. The proposal...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On that being down 1% on applications, is that across the board or is that specific to the 2-year or the 4-year?
That's across the board. I believe 2-year is actually up 1% and 4-year is down 1% or 2%.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. The proposal to add an audit that requires applicants that have indicated they have college credit hours to enter the name of the previous or current institution. I believe this one should actually be agenda item E now that I'm looking at it. I think we had decided we needed more discussion on that item. Installing the College Board integration to allow applicants from within Applied Texas. I believe last meeting we decided to table that until next cycle. At the request of the coordinating board, we tested the integration of a widget called ADVI, or ADVI, into Applied Texas that will provide automated responses to common questions from both applicants and counselors. And I believe the timeline is still early May to add that, and that'll be a very easy add. And then I thought I would spend a few minutes showing you all what we've been working on in regards to the applicant site. So I'm going to move over there.
So to inform you all on where we are right now, David was ready to tee up his presentations. However, the computer has decided otherwise and is now updating itself.
At 15%. Oh, 18.
And it's at 18%. We can continue to give you updates on the percentage of completion. Otherwise, we are trying to see what we can do.
He is a part of the technical team after all.
All right, go for it, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think there were difficulties earlier broadcasting what I'm about to show, so I'm not sure if those got worked out or not. So this is the new homepage. I think it's up in front of you all right now.
Can someone on the phone let us know if you can see what David's showing?
Hey, Rebecca, it's Angie. I was actually just going to say there's a lag time on the YouTube video. So we can see you guys right now, but we won't be able to see the screen for probably another minute or so.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's too bad, because you're going to be really impressed when you get to see the first one.
We'll have a delayed reaction. You'll know when we can see it.
I'll say, yes, please let us know when you start to see. Hopefully it'll be a little bit quicker.
They said they can't see it until the computer is restarted, so we might have to wait a few minutes.
This is what it would look like on an iPhone 6, iPad. It is mobile optimized.
We are going to try to get the camera to actually show the screen. We're also, Claudette has logged in, and we're also seeing the delay now. Like, actually, yeah, a good minute, minute and a half.
So, David, does that mean that students are going to answer my criminal background question correctly now on their iPhone?
I hope so.
Killing me.
So those of you on
can see it.
YouTube, we can,
That's great.
we have a camera trying to adjust right now, but this is the overall look of it right now that we were all very impressed with.
Looks great.
Should I continue? So one thing we did is a lot of the text of the questions we've moved to the explanatory text and help text. We've moved to mouse overs to try to make the form more readable. Michelle brought up earlier moving more of the common parts to the initial profile. What we did was we looked at all 9 application types and we grabbed everything that was in common across all 9 application types, and we've added that to the initial profile. And we plan to keep it there and not present the same information to applicants twice. So we think that'll shorten the actual applications significantly. Some of them will be extremely short now. There's a lot more front-end validation going on. We've also broken up the profile into 10 smaller sections. And we added a date picker as well for a lot of the date fields. Applicants will only be presented some questions depending on how they enter others. The biggest challenge with this was the Texas residency and preliminary visa information. We have added logic to determine which of those sections they'll need to fill out as part of the profile. And so later on, in this current example, I've indicated I'm a U.S. citizen, so later on I'll be presented with the Texas residency questions. Better?
Look, I turned off some light.
For those of you on the phone or tuning in, we are actually working on trying to make it a little more readable.
Another big change is in the current application, the high school and college searches pop open separate windows. We've changed that so that the search is in line. Oops, I can't type, sorry. They still have the option, if they've attended multiple high schools, to enter more high schools. It works the same way with colleges. They can also enter additional previous colleges if they've attended more than one. And then the last section of the profile is the residency section. They're presented this depending on how they entered the U.S. citizen, U.S. permanent resident questions. They'll either be presented with this section or the current preliminary visa section if we determine they need to answer international questions. We think adding all of this information will, for one thing, reduce the size of the actual applications that the students fill out. We also think by collecting all this information up front, we'll be able to better guide them to which application type they fill out. We still have instances where applicants select the wrong application type and then they get a page or two in and, you know, they've done some work that they need to go back and correct, or in some cases they even submit the wrong application type, and we'd like to help alleviate that.
David, from what I can tell, these questions, at least that first three, really get to that House Bill 1403, which is, I get that. Can you go to what the actual questions are that would lead down this tree towards residency that you were referring to? You said based on how they answer the initial questions. Can you show those to us?
Sure. So they're the same questions that currently appear on all the the Texas residency questions are the same questions that appear on the current domestic versions of our applications. So U.S. freshman, U.S. transfer. The way we currently determine what application type they should be filling out is we give them some guidance. We have a page that says, here's our application types and a brief description of each. Once they get into the application, if they answer the U.S. citizen questions a certain way, we'll return an error message if they've selected the wrong application types. So what we've changed about that is on this page, this is page 3 of the profile, if they either indicate that they're a U.S. citizen or that they hold permanent resident status, or that they have an application for permanent residence pending, or that they've lived in Texas for 36 consecutive months. If they answer any of those questions in the affirmative, then we've determined they need to answer the Texas residency questions. If they answer them all no, then at that point we've determined that they need to answer the preliminary visa questions because they're an international applicant. That's all based on our current logic in the current system. We haven't changed any of that decision-making. It's just where we've presented the information to them.
Thank you, David.
Sure. See what else I had. We are planning to add autosave. We don't have that installed yet, but we're planning on adding that. And I think that's all I had right now. I'd be curious to hear feedback and also show any of the pages how they'd look on mobile if you'd like to see that.
So yeah, could you go ahead and show us a few
Sure.
on mobile?
Sure. So this is what it would look like on what flavor of mobile does anyone have a request? This is what it looks like on an iPhone 6.
Let's do a phone, yeah.
Okay.
I've got a question for you, David.
Yes,
So
sir.
thinking about the research that was just shared with us by Taylor, Mr. Taylor, excuse me, my question is the language. Have we done anything in regards to the language since his research was first conducted to help us on that readability scale now with the new format? Because the new format looks great.
So the history of the Apply Texas actual question text since I've been involved with Apply Texas the last 10 years is that the committee has always been involved in the exact question text, so we haven't changed that. We've changed how it's presented. So a lot of the mouse over and help text, we've tried to make the form much cleaner for applicants, and if they need that information, they can mouse over some of the boxes, and we've still got that instruction there for them. But as far as actually changing it, we haven't changed a lot of that.
Understood. Thank you.
We'll be happy to if anyone wants to give us freedom to do so.
Can we, in Section E, can we discuss that kind of authorization, Claudette? Let's make sure we do that, because there are some easy changes I think Zach's already identified that we could turn over for sure. Okay, or we could vote on. Thank you. I want to echo what Mordecai said. This looks fantastic. I know I'm very excited. We've talked about this for a long time, so being able to see it in front, well, most of us can see it right in front of our faces at this time. Hopefully those of you tuning in are starting to see it as well. This looks really good, and I appreciate the work that you all have done. I also want to acknowledge what Mordecai was addressing, is that you've addressed several of the optimization issues that was identified through the research that Zach did already. And I appreciate that, because you've already looked at mobile optimize, you've already shortened it for us in some ways. Autosave is being added. The norm and standardization, we know across apps is going to take some work of the committees and the universities for agreement. And then we've just discussed readability. So I want to give you kudos for going ahead and taking care of some of those acknowledgments and getting those into this new product.
Thank you, and we also want to, it's been a long process, and we want to thank the committee for your patience with this. So, we are hoping to push this out to our administrative users sometime in the middle of March, because we'd like to get some of their feedback once they start playing with this form. And we are currently moving to work on the application types. We feel pretty good about where we are with the profile and the questions we've included on there. Now it's the individual application types that we're working on.
David, how will that communication roll out in regards to informing our constituents that, yes, go in, start using, this is what it looks like? How is that word getting out? Is it just going to be through the suite itself, the Apply Texas suite, or is it going to be an email, or what are we looking at?
We'll probably, we've got a fairly active listserv, and so we'll probably email everybody. Looking ahead, we would really like to improve some of the communication tools we have involved in the administrative and the counselor suite. If we have technical difficulties, we'd like to be able to push those notifications out a little quicker. But we also want to make sure you all are involved in the decision for how that happens. And so I think Graham and I, one of us would love to be involved in the communications committee moving forward.
Sounds good. And I know this is your agenda item, Rebecca. My recommendation would then be, if we not allow this opportunity to pass, to really scream to the mountaintops that you have a new format, and I don't know if the listserv is going to achieve that. Right. I feel as though it just quietly whispers to others that, hey, we did something differently, and go take a look. And you have an opportunity to really let some folks know the work that y'all have been doing. So, Rebecca, my recommendation would be that please, let's look at what we can do from a campaign conversation, even if it's an official email to the presidents and the administrators of institutions, that they know that Applied Texas now has a new student experience.
Mordecai, I like the suggestion. I completely agree with you. Perhaps this is something the subcommittee could go ahead and start working on drafting to send out as I'm looking around, so that we can send this out to all of the universities and all the different methods that we know that we have. This is extremely exciting work. I know there has been a lot of discussion across the state and across with our users about what we can't do. I would love to show them what you've been working toward and what we will be doing very shortly, because I believe that we're on our way to definitely becoming the best application experience for the students. So this is a great idea. Mordecai, I think the subcommittee should take this on, and let's get it written before we meet next. Our next meeting is April 20th, I believe. So let's try to have that ready and approved for the next meeting, yeah.
Well, you know what? Thinking timeline. If they're trying to roll this out mid-March, we may need to see if there's a means in which to do an electronic approval of this committee.
We can do that too. The March rollout, correct me if I'm wrong, David, that's to the admins though at the universities to start testing. It's not actually for use.
Yes, correct.
It'll just be to
for
the
admins at
admins.
that point, because we still want to get a
Yes.
healthy amount of response from all our administrative users.
Yeah, and I agree, but I don't think we want to delay sending out this update of this is what's coming. So, matter of fact, one of the things we could actually update is in March, the admins will have a chance to begin testing. But to give people an idea of here's what's coming, since there's so much talk across the state about Apply Texas and other applications and schools wanting to have their own application, I think they're going to be missing out if they don't look and see what's coming this summer.
Rebecca, there may be an opportunity also at TACAC in late March that we might have multiple audiences there to be able to also give a brief update or to be able to share at that moment in time too.
That's a very good idea. Do you know if we have a session at TACAC? I honestly do not know. Wonder if we could. Okay.
I'll email Tony Sarda and see if there's a session.
Perfect. If we don't, also ask him if we don't have one, if there's any space perhaps to get one on the schedule at this point. And David or Graham, I would love to be able to give us a preview at TACAC, if that's something we can get a session, just to give them a snippet. You don't have to go through as much, but I'd love to be able to roll this out and get people talking about it.
Is there anyone on the committee that's going to TACAC? I have another commitment, so I will not be at the TACAC conference, so that I can put a point of contact.
Does anyone know? I was not signed up.
Seems like it's the last weekend of March, but let me look. I have a couple of staff members going.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I had, unless anyone has anything else.
March 29 through 31.
Thank you, Dara. Are there any other questions for David as he's wrapping up his presentation?
It starts on a Sunday, just to be clear. It starts on a Sunday? Okay, okay.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate the presentation. That was very exciting to see. We've all been thinking about it, but to have it visual was really fulfilling. So thank you for doing that for us and for all the work of the entire team. You've come a long ways and have done a lot of good work on your own. So really appreciate this. It's looking great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We're going to move now into agenda item E, a discussion and consideration of proposed changes to Apply Texas forms or procedures. Subpoint A, proposed request to make available the same application types for 2-year institutions that are currently available to 4-year institutions. Discussion and consideration.
It seemed like the last session, this was one we thought more discussion was needed, and maybe once we had made the move to AWS, I think.
Would this be something, and I don't like to have a bunch of subcommittees either, but this is pretty in-depth to be able to say we're going to make the same application. I don't know that all community colleges know what that means, because the same application, I guess we're talking about just the beginning of the application. Do we need a group to look at this more thoroughly and make sure this is something that they want before we say yes or no? Because I'm not sure I fully understand what we're looking at.
So
This is Michelle. I'm not sure I understand what they mean by the same types, because certainly it wouldn't be appropriate to have a graduate application for a community
I think
college.
I think that's along the lines of what it was, actually. I believe it's both international and grad, and that there are community schools now offering four-year plans. And so I
Yes,
think that
are
there
community
was
colleges. Yeah.
some further discussion needed.
I know Rebecca and I both were reviewing the previous minutes just to see how we went down this path, and I'm internally praying that it's not my fault that we went down this path. So I'm just trying to see. I remember last time bringing up conversation about dual credit, but I don't, dual credit app, but I don't recall that recommendation for this conversation coming from myself. Is anyone on the call that represents the community colleges or works for a community college that perhaps...
It was
That's
a
from the
request that came in through our administrative site.
administrative site request? Did it have any additional?
This is Rebecca Griffith. I don't recall what the origin of this was, because I don't know, other than the issue that some of the community colleges do now have bachelor's programs or are adding them shortly. So I don't really recall that. You said it came in through the administrative suite. What do you have that request? Maybe that'll refresh our memory.
So I'm trying to pull that up right now. David shared that with us. Well, with me, I don't know if it made it to the materials that were sent out, but there is a spreadsheet that the UT Applied Texas staff does keep of the requests that come in through the administrative suite, and that's where they'll come in and say, we want a change, they'll propose the change, and you have the documentation of the institution and what their request was. So I'm trying to pull that up right now. Which institution was it from?
I found it some in my minutes that I took, or my notes that I took at the last session. At the last meeting. So I have the one piece here that I see is that 4-year have 8 different types of applications, 2-year have 1 app that is being modified. And there was a question or a problem with if the students indicate they are not a resident, the app changes and offers them international questions. I have that as a challenge under the 2-year 1 app model. But then I do have the note that this was a big change and better after AWS. That's the only notes I took on that particular agenda item when we discussed it last time. And that doesn't help me much.
No, I understand. Claudette, is it possible, so we can move on, can we make an action to contact the individual that submitted the request and achieve some additional context?
Yes, and like from previous minutes, we were looking at discussing this a little further, but it was thought that we should wait, you guys should wait until next cycle. So if that's the action you want to do, is to move forward, I can put that in the notes, and then that a staff member will contact the requester, and we'll move to the next cycle.
Yeah, because it's possible there's just something that we're just not picking up on that is real crucial. So if we could, please.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, it makes sense to me, Michelle, it makes sense to me that now that they've moved to a model of being able to offer bachelor's degrees or 4-year degrees, that we would need to revisit their application. And so the request sounds reasonable. It just probably needs to be fleshed out a bit. And it's possible that, what worked for them before with respect to residency will not work when you're considering offering a bachelor's degree.
And just as kind of a side note, it might be helpful to rethink what we have on those request forms to maybe give some indication that if you're going to make a request for a modification, it might be helpful for you to be present in one way or another at the next meeting. Rather than sort of guess what people's thoughts are, it'd be helpful to just have them here so that we could ask the questions we need to make the decisions, because I couldn't reasonably make any decision on this without any information.
I found in my notes, this was from Tyler Junior College. had submitted the request and that we were just going to table it to find out more information from them about why they were inquiring about this.
Very good. Okay, so thank you for the recommendation, Miguel. I definitely agree. It's an opportunity, at least a call in, a call in. But then there also needs to be communication to prompt that individual to be on the call in. So is that something we can look at, Claudette?
Yes, and just know that every year we streamline these processes a little bit further. I mean, in the time that I've taken over the Apply Texas, there was an actual form that collected all the information, and then we moved it to an online system, and now we're still learning. So I agree with you guys on that recommendation to invite those. We might kind of do a loop back to inform them that we're bringing their item to the meeting for consideration, and then have them on the call at some point in time. So that's going to be a little bit more admin work, but if we'd like to do that, it just really depends on how many of these requests we get in, but at least a call in might be helpful.
Hey, out of curiosity, David, is the interface also for the Apply Texas Suite changing as well along with the application? The Counselor Suite?
Yes, all three interfaces are changing. The applicant site that I just presented, the administrative site, and the counselor suite. The administrative site is very close to its current look and feel, except that it'll be mobile optimized also.
Thank you. All right, so thank you all. Let's just move on to B now.
What are you going to do with this one?
Oh. Okay, so officially, okay, is that a motion? Thank you. So I'm still learning. This is, I thought we were ready to move on to B. All right, so school me, Rebecca. What do I need to do? Do we need a motion to table?
I think let's do a motion to table since we've talked about it twice, and this will be the official motion to table until next cycle. So do we have a motion?
A motion to move it to.
This is Michelle. I move that we table this till next cycle.
Michelle?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Michelle, and we have a second from Jamie already, so thank you. All those that approve, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Very good. This is officially tabled, and we will follow up with Tyler Junior College, and we will take this up again in the fall for consideration for the next cycle. Okay, Mordecai, there you go.
Thank you so much. Process improvement underway. Okay, moving on to B now. Proposed request to require applicants to answer 3 questions related to establishing domicile in Texas.
That was Paula's recommendation, so if you want to.
Yes, that would be mine. And as stated earlier, the committee did meet, and the committee agreed that they found no issues, and they proposed that it be accepted. The 3 questions that we are discussing is question 3, if your parent or legal guardian is currently living in Texas, how long has she or he been living in Texas? Question 2, is your parent or legal guardian, what is the main purpose for being in the state? Question 4, is your parent or legal guardian a member of the U.S. military? Is Texas his or home of record? Yes or no? What state is listed as his or her military legal residence for tax purposes on his or her leave and earning statements? And then the last question, do any of the following apply to your parent or legal guardian? Hold the title, warranty deed, deed of trust, or other similar instrument that is effective to hold title to residential real property in Texas? Yes or no? Have ownership, interest, and customary manage a business in Texas without the intention of liquidation in the foreseeable future? Yes or no? These are the 3 questions that the committee approved.
Okay. Are there any questions or clarity before we actually vote?
I want to make sure, so we're voting to, they're currently part of the information we present on the parent or legal guardian. Applicants are not currently even presented those questions if they answer prior questions in a certain way. I want to make sure that we're still saying that that holds true. It's just if they are presented this section, in that case, these 3 will be required.
That is correct. It's only if they're presented with that.
Great, thank you.
One concern that I have is talking about the readability. I'm concerned that those questions, the way they're phrased, would not resonate with a 17-year-old.
What opportunities do we have in regards to the readability? Is it possible to where the committee can work directly with David's team in regards to the readability before it is taken up and approved? Is that a possibility, or do you all, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think with respect to these 3 questions, what we were asked to look at, we need to approve adding these 3, and then readability is a whole nother issue. We need to discuss readability with respect to the entire app. And with respect to residency questions, I think we are constrained a bit. We would probably need approval to make any changes to the residency questions. That's what I understood in the past.
So if I understand, by approving, it has to be implemented? Just for clarity, because if we take a vote to approve, does that mean implementation?
Well, I think so. I think, this is Michelle, I think that we add these questions. Basically, there's the same questions that exist in other apps. So it wouldn't be reasonable for us to edit the question in one app and not edit it in the other. So I think we add the questions to the app because that's what we were asked to do, was to consider adding these 3 questions based on them being present in other apps. And then we look at readability, and maybe that would get done before the next cycle as well, but that's my thinking.
I believe it was the process rather than the language that you guys were reviewing, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, and to your point, Jamie, I think if your subcommittee still wants to continue exploring based on her recommendation, by Jamie's recommendation, that might be something the subcommittee can continue look at about the residency questions, language of the residency questions. So your subcommittee would technically change, but it's still regarding residency. It would become, I think, more readability. And to Michelle's point, if you're exploring just those questions, you're exploring the entire readability of the Applied Texas application, which would probably be a lot longer process. So I think you're correct about voting on the logic right now, the process rather than but we'll make a note of that, and it'll probably come up again.
And just to be clear, my reasoning for that questioning is I just didn't, especially with the presentation that we just had, and knowing that these questions are going to be answered by a specific population, that we create potential barriers. But if I understand correctly, this is more about process than language. Okay. All right. So at this time, are there any other additional questions for clarity before we take vote?
I have a question. So in the addition of these 3 questions, how does that change the process? Because I'm missing a piece here. So we're approving the 3 questions, but how does that change the process if this is a process vote? Am I all by myself on this?
No, you're not by
Okay.
yourself. I just didn't want to be the barrier.
I'm open. I'm just not sure what we're doing. So,
So right now, if they go down a certain path, I don't even know if I'm answering the right question. Applicants are presented with these questions. They are not currently required to answer them, though. And that's what this request is about. Right now, they can pass through that section and not answer them. We make an assumption based on their non-answer that it's not applicable to them.
yes, thank you. That does help. So what we're really voting on is that we approve for these 3 questions to become required portions of the residency based on the path that would take students to this. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone making a motion towards approval? Let's try that again. Would anyone from the subcommittee that actually conducted the work would like to make a motion for the approval?
Yes, this is Rebecca Griffith, and I move that we approve the addition of these questions as required questions.
Thank you. Would someone else from the subcommittee like to second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Agenda item E, subsection B is approved towards implementation, and my understanding is that there will be a much larger conversation and review of readability at another time. Go for it, David.
I should have asked, are we thinking with the current cycle, we want to go ahead and implement this as soon as possible, or just the new cycle will be opening July 1st?
What are the chances of us being able to add this for the upcoming cycle that will be opening July 1st?
It's for sure July 1st.
We
I'm
talk about
saying
now.
Right
the
away.
current applications that are
That's a
open
good
right
question.
now.
So would this adversely affect or inversely affect any decisions that have already been made with residency that could cause an inequity?
Yeah, it could. I would recommend July.
I think July then. I don't want to put an inequity in the middle. Agreement on July?
Yes.
I agree with that. When you start changing it, then you have apps that some have the questions, some don't, and it gets very confusing from a processing side.
All right, thank you all. Let's move forward to now subsection C, proposed request to allow the selection of more than one major for graduate applications. Is there any conversation around this, or before we call for vote?
So this, Michelle, I believe that was brought forward. I might have brought it forward or asked about it because there was a lot of talk of graduate departments wanting to do that. However, I believe I mentioned at the last meeting, Texas A&M has moved away from Apply Texas, unfortunately. So it's a non-issue for us, and so I think that if that's going to be implemented, some of the other universities who offer graduate applications through Apply Texas should be the ones to decide that question.
So I guess my question would be, would this bring an advantage to graduate programs using Apply Texas to add this? Or do we know adversely any disadvantages this might bring to be able to, for a student to put forth two majors? Thinking about student systems, for those of you that know your student system, with this, can you think of anything that, I'm trying to decide, do we go ahead and discuss it, or do we just table it because the originator has withdrawn their need?
From the UT Austin perspective, we wouldn't have any interest in that.
All right, so at this time, do we have to make a motion for discontinuance? I believe we do, right?
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, so what's up for conversation now is that the original requester of this consideration has withdrawn, and just in conversation around the table and on the phone, it would seem as though there is no interest to continue with this as an approval motion. So at this time, we're going to take a motion vote towards discontinuance, not tabling, but actually discontinuing this item for further discussion. So do I have a motion for discontinuance of this particular item?
Almost.
I move we discontinue. This, Michelle.
For a second.
Thank you, Michelle. Do we have a second? Miguel, you're your second? Okay. All in favor of discontinuance, say aye.
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 All,
Aye.
all opposed, same sign? Okay, this item has been discontinued. Let's move forward. Subsection D, proposed request for different formats for delivery of data to the institution. Proposed request for different formats for delivery of data to the institution.
This is something we definitely plan to pursue once we've moved. And I think that's the direction the committee went the last time we met on this item.
And by moving forward, you mean in the next cycle? This is something we could look at? Because I know I get questions about this quite a bit.
I think anytime in the very near future, probably not. But it's hard to give an estimate on it until we've moved over there, but we know there's demand for it, and we'd really like to move in the direction of offering not only EDI, but we get requests for CSV, JSON, several different ones, and we'd definitely like to look that way, just not anytime in the immediate future.
So due to systems implementation and rollout of AWS, are we saying that this item will be tabled to the next cycle? Okay, so that's what the vote will be. Rebecca, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to make the motion. So I'd like to make a motion to the committee that this particular item be tabled and reconsidered in the fall for further investigation, for implementation and changes.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that. This is Jamie.
All right, thank you, Jamie. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. All right, we will table that item. Moving on to subsection E, proposed request to make the gender question required instead of optional. All right, is there someone with us that made this request for proposal, or someone more knowledgeable about this particular request can speak forward at this time?
Do we know where this one came from?
I believe it came from the same institution, two different sources. It came in through the administrative tool for sure. And then, Claudette, did they reach out to you directly? Am I misremembering?
So yeah, they reached out to me. That's right. I'd have to go back.
Have you run this by your OGC or your general counsel?
Oh, it's not
I'm wondering
me.
if we can legally require it.
Yeah, this did not come from my institution. Someone reached out to me and asked me to bring it forward.
So
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
wondering.
This is Rebecca Griffith, and until and unless the state of Texas allows us to report students without gender, it should be a required question, in my opinion, because that's the way we have to report people, and the required option should be male or female. That's not consistent with some things that are happening in the social landscape, but it's the way it is for reporting.
Just for clarity, David, or Graham, or anyone, can you all actually verify that this statement or stance is true? Is it optional? I thought it was required. It is optional. It is.
It's optional. There's two options, male or female, and it's not required. If the applicant does not select either of those, we send a code of U for unknown in the EDI.
Yeah, and so, again, this is Rebecca Griffith, and see, that to me is disingenuous because the state requires it. If the state doesn't require it on its application instrument and the institution has to turn around and inquire of that student what their gender selection is, it appears that the institution is interested in that, but not the state, and I don't think, I just think that that's not in congruence with how we report, and it's not accurate. It is the state that requires us to report gender.
It's been my understanding that I was looking for the request, like everyone else, like everything else today with technical difficulties. I can't pull it up as quick as I'd like to, but from my understanding, the request was mainly due to determine housing. It wasn't, and that was what the intent of the question was to be required for.
Colleagues,
That may have been why this request was made, but I've always felt like, as a registrar, it should be a required option again because it relates to state reporting.
I'll make a statement out there, and let's see if we all feel the same. Because of the potential implications and ramifications of a stance by this particular body, I think would behoove us to work with our legal team in terms of whether or not our system as applied Texas as it currently stands today is in alignment with state statute, or if there's a misalignment, because if so, then there's a bigger conversation to be had rather than us having the ability to make a decision today. So I would like to make the recommendation out there that we work with Claudette and your team, with our legal team, to see if there is current misalignment or not, or if this is a discussion item for this body or not. I think there's a bit of appropriateness in context here. What are your thoughts, Claudette?
We can talk to our legal team. From my understanding, everything is still acceptable. Again, with the intent, the question or the request was really with that intent of housing. From my understanding, and I just kind of chatted with Rebecca, is that in order to find whether or not a person is a male or female for the housing issue is through Apply Texas or a transcript. And so I think that's why this request has been put forth, because they wanted that opportunity. So I'm not entirely sure that we want to open a can of worms about language regarding the residency or requirement, but I'll have a conversation with our legal team just to kind of let them know that this is coming, to make sure, to your point. But again, I just wanted to stick to the requester's intent of the question, which was about housing.
Yes, it is. I found the original request that was sent to me, so it was concerning housing. And they mentioned that the field is now coming in blank on several submitted applications. So I think they're not loading the U for unknown is what they're not doing. And so they're saying it's causing difficulty with housing assignments. And that's why they sent it forward.
Well, again,
Michelle, and I want to support what Becky Griffiths said, because her particular point is well made. It is an issue with respect to state reporting, and those students show up on our error reports. And I have to say that it's really troublesome to enter something as gender when the student has not been the one, when the student has chosen not to answer it. So if we don't give them that choice, it would be very helpful. I mean, I agree. It's a problem because we have to report it to the state, and yet we aren't requiring it anywhere. So while it is a housing issue, it is also a state reporting.
How are you currently obtaining the data? Are there any other ways that you obtain this without the use of Apply Texas?
Well, we might look at a student's transcript if we have one on file. But even then, I prefer not to have to enter it on behalf of the student. That, they've chosen not to respond to that question, so it's a little difficult.
Correct. And if it's taken to legal counsel just under the context that was requested about housing,
right?
Again, it should be pointed out that the state of, I understand the application is one thing, but this instrument creates a record in most of our systems, especially for those of us that report it or that import it. And that record will not have a gender if the student doesn't answer. And the incidence of not selecting gender on this application has risen dramatically in recent years, resulting in a lot more cleanup for reporting officials.
So I'll bring that.
Do that work.
I'll bring the issue to our legal counsel in the way you've explained it. My point is that right now I'm not going to talk to them about the housing. I'm going to bring it to the point about the reporting requirement. But when we're talking through these items, you're bringing up another request within a request. So I'm just trying to make sure we separate those two requests and not get leave the scope of the intent of the original question into another issue that was not really brought up. That's what I'm trying to say. So we're going to hold, again, because of the intent was about the housing, I wanted to keep it on that, but I will bring to our legal department your point about reporting, state reporting and the issue. But then that's going to be a whole other request that someone would have to bring to this committee about making those changes if you want to pursue that. So that's why I'm trying to keep it separate.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, Claudette, and I think that, so there's the issue of, is something legal or not? Are we following what the state laws prescribe that we do? That's a always address issue on the side that we have to always make sure that we're maintaining that. This particular issue in of itself, I would not be in support of making it required for the purpose of housing. I think housing applications should be the ones that decide how they're going to sort that out. The gender issue, you may see a lot more people unknown now because it is becoming a tremendously larger issue than it has been in the past. And we don't have an application that necessarily is accommodating to everybody's concerns related to gender. And so I think if we're going to take a vote or table it, if we're going to take a vote on that particular item, then, I would vote against it.
Right, and that's, we can definitely explore for future more ways in collecting gender, but again, that's a separate request than what we're really looking for at this point in time. So I just want to make sure we're keeping it separate.
So to provide additional clarity to my recommendation to the body then is that we work with our legal team to ensure, as is currently, that our practice with Apply Texas is in alignment with state statute.
Not at this point. It's for, the request was for making the requirement, the gender question required in order to accommodate those that are considering it for housing.
Got it.
So that's where, I don't know if that's.
Understood. Understood. Okay. Got it. Got it. All right.
You could actually refer back to Miguel. He just summarized very succinctly a motion, if he would allow us to do so, to allow housing to determine how best to acquire this information versus pushing it off on Apply Texas.
Yes, I make that motion.
All right. Do we have a...
Good job.
Thank you, Miguel. And thank you, Rebecca. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. In regards to protocol then for conversation, future conversation, would the recommendation then be, Claudette and Rebecca, that needs to be submitted to the Apply Texas Suite for further consideration at a later time in our April meeting?
Well, and I'll still have the discussion with our legal team to prepare, but if that's something that we want to consider, you probably should make it a formal process within our system.
Very good. Okay, thank you all. Last item under this section here of E, subset F, discuss update on the online development of the Texas application for state financial aid in the Apply Texas system.
And that's me. That's really for a discussion and not necessarily an action item. But so I oversee the development currently. I've been working very closely with the UT Apply Texas team as we have more updates coming. I did want to let you all know that we have been soliciting. It went out like last week, I believe, to solicit members for this TASFA, Texas Application for Financial Aid, that is supposed to be integrated in the Apply Texas system. So if you'll let your financial aid or anyone know about this that you think might be a good fit for the committee, we have up to 24 spots. I think we have a little over 50 nominees that have come in. And this is inclusive of 2-year, 4-year, public, private. We also have a student representative. We also have a financial aid personnel. So we have lots of different forms. Nonprofits are also invited to participate for feedback. So as we're getting those nominations, we have a very quick turnaround time. Our closing will be February 28th, which is this week. So we have that. And it's all because we have to have these recommendations go to the legislature. So we'll have about 4 at least 3 meetings between April and August for the commitment of any person. So I can send that information out to you guys. We've sent it to our listserv, we've sent it to Texas Education Agency, we've sent it to some nonprofit organizations and some other stakeholders to kind of solicit some nominations for the committee. But the committee itself will be convening, and I know that our Applied Texas staff will be part of that conversation as well, obviously, because they'll be assisting with the development. But they'll be exploring the implementation of the TASFA, the development, the cost, soliciting feedback from the field. So those are their tasks that we will be going over through the TASFA committee. So if you have any questions or need more information, you can just contact me.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments, questions, interest? All right, awesome. We're going to move on to the write-in. There was an additional write-in that we discussed at the beginning of our meeting for a G write-in for a subset here regarding language change. Rebecca, could you please give us some additional context regarding that write-in?
Absolutely. Earlier, while David was doing his presentation, the question came up about readability and what we could do to go ahead and affect those changes in a positive way at this point. David reminded us that normally the wording of the different questions and such have to go through the committee. However, I would like to discuss at this time the opportunity that we have based on Zach Taylor's research. If you look on his slide number 7, which is on page 4 of the presentation that he gave us, he has some suggestions that he has made, which should not be included in the Applied Texas application. Some suggestions he made concerning some wordy items and also passive voice. And what I'd like to discuss now are the opportunities to go ahead and give the technical team the option and the responsibility to look for this language and make corrections grammatically as they can and go ahead and move us in that direction. So now this is open for discussion.
This is Miguel from ET. I think it makes a lot of sense to give them the flexibility and freedom to make those basic changes without having to go to a very large vote and discussion of things. Seems like that's the most efficient way to handle it.
I think for the good of those that are on the call or here today or not here with us, that whatever those changes are, if we can log what those changes are before official change is perhaps made or what's being recommended, so we can increase the readability and remove any barriers that may be present for our Texas families. But if we can just log that and then bring it up for discussion, I think we'll be good.
Or one suggestion I might have is to start with actually the chart that is provided so that words like additional would be changed to added or extra, or passive verse where it's am admitted just becomes admitted. I'm with Zach on that. Passive voice is one of my pet peeves.
I would caution, everything we want to do is to reduce barriers and make things usable. Some of the things listed as complex over in the wordy items are sort of the standard for web forms. So things like required, you will notice that across many, many web forms. There are required elements and non-required elements. So I want to be a little bit careful about taking kind of a generic standard and applying it in this domain. So I absolutely think we should look at this, but I do not expect we would adopt this as is without additional usability consideration.
I think my proposal would be to also, for you to use your best judgment in going through these, because we're also looking at a list of words and phrases that we have not looked at in context either. So context would be something as you're looking through it may not make sense to change some of these as you just use in your example of required.
And been convicted is probably not going to switch to active voice. Yeah.
Good. So at this time, do I have a motion for this work of, and I'm so sorry, you eloquently put that, Rebecca, earlier, but for the review of the language regarding readability and removal of passive language. Is that accurate? Mm-hmm. Okay. So do I have a motion for that in a second?
I'd like to motion for that.
Okay. All right. So, all right. And we have a second. Thank you all. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All opposed, same sign. Okay, very good. Thank you all very much. Ms. Rebecca.
So I need to, at this point, Claudette, would you like to bring up we have 2 more additional items that I'll let Claudette introduce.
Sure, I'm sorry. So we have a couple of new items on the agenda that came through later than when the agenda was posted to the Texas Register. So we have a proposal to set up and install Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics in Applied Texas to allow tracking of how applicants arrive at Applied Texas. This is a new request from Texas A&M Commerce. And the next, I don't know if y'all want to discuss that one now or just, okay, we'll go ahead and do that one. So, yeah, that's one of the ones that was requested. You have some background on that one?
I do. Is Paul on the call? I think he was going to try to be on the call.
Is there a Paul on the call?
So this is an effort. They'd like to find out which of their marketing campaigns are effective. And this is a first step towards that goal. If we collect and store some of this information on in our database about where applicants are coming from, the proposal is that eventually we would store this information and then send it to the institution along with the rest of the transmitted application data. And it would help them to determine where applicants were coming from and how effective their placement of certain links on their sites were and which marketing and advertising campaigns were effective. So the proposal is to install Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics as a first step towards collecting and storing some of this other information and then passing it on to institutions with completed applications.
I have a question. What is the amount of time or the scope of work that would be required to implement something like this?
So one thing that we'd thought of is let's say an applicant comes from Texas A&M Commerce's site. We store that they came from there. They eventually fill out and complete an application to UT Austin, determining whether to send that information. That's the one thing I'd thought of. As far as implementation, installing Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics would not be terribly difficult as a first step, but I think we'd want to think about the structure of how we're storing the data and then how we pass it to institutions.
My question is, does such a request, and out of total respect to the institution that's requesting it, does the request itself challenge the larger work that's ahead right now in regards to the rollout with AWS, the formatting, some of the larger pieces? Would we have to jump in priority scale in terms of where this request would land that would impact the current work that's underway for the larger body of institutions that they're awaiting?
Right. Obviously anything that we tackle is going to take away from the efforts in moving this to AWS.
Would you say this is a medium, small, big project?
I'd have to look at it more because we haven't done this type of thing before. I would think this actual request is between small and medium.
Please remind me, Rebecca, at what point do we look at the prioritization of work requests, additional work requests, to see how they fall? Is that in the April meeting or is that a fall meeting?
We actually do that in each meeting. So
Okay.
today, we would be looking at anything that's new, since David gave us his update in item D of what they're working on. Anything new now, we would have to decide, is this something we want to push forward, and then prioritize those things that we do push forward. We haven't pushed forward a lot in this meeting, so we really haven't talked about prioritization yet.
Right. Go ahead,
And
Claudia.
as a reminder, this has been these last 2 years have been a little bit different than how the committee has worked in the past because of the transition to AWS. So but as these requests have been coming in, if there's small changes, medium changes, it seems that the Applied Texas staff has been very good about adding them and completing them and or at least committing to doing that for the next cycle. So they've shared, what they can do and can't do within that transition.
I would also comment that we also get a couple different kinds of requests. One of them is something that you would want to roll out with a new cycle change that, as we talked about requiring the residency questions earlier, mid-cycle, so there's that type of request that you wouldn't want to change the nature of the questions or applications midway through the cycle. This type of request is something that could be rolled out mid-cycle, I would think, because it's not a question change, it's nothing that's presented to the applicant, if that makes sense.
And to get back to Mordecai's question of a prioritization at this point, the only thing in this section from proposed changes that we so far have voted as a yes and not to table or to push to another, to next fall, was actually the proposed questions, but we did say we want to wait till July, so really we pushed that one as well. Everything else so far has come in as either a do not forward or to table to the fall.
Yeah, and Miguel from UT Austin. So it seems like, in general, our Apply Texas system should have whatever Google Analytics are necessary to understand where folks are coming from, and in general. As far as tying it to a specific campaign, I think that's where, so I think that an institution can get creative and just create a separate landing page. So you provide a link that puts them to your own institutional sort of landing page, and then from there they can track whatever they want to track, and then that kicks them to Apply Texas. I think what David said is absolutely right. You may not know if that student, who are they applying to, and where did they actually come in from? Did they then pick UT Austin? And I think so you can connect the dots, I think, with the data that you have, and using some pseudo landing pages for that to accomplish this.
Well, and I'm gonna go ahead, Dara, please.
Well, I was just thinking through, because I feel like that's more of an institutional request than it is an Applied Texas request, although it might be interesting from a high level for Applied Texas to be able to share where applicants come from, but not at an individual institutional level.
I agree. That's actually what I was going to say, is that, again, with no disrespect to the institution, there are ways that you can measure a communication campaign without having to even add the Google tag to the website. I know you can use specialty links for students to use to go into a place, and sometimes you can actually use it, if you're coming from your website, you can actually count the clicks on your own website versus having Apply Texas count the clicks or the click-throughs. So that's another thing to consider, is this is something institutionally that could be done there and not pushed onto the application.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong, that we should make a motion that this item be added to the request of potential updates to be addressed, however, just be added to the list for further considerations at another time.
I guess my question would be, are we actually saying that, or are we saying that that this should be something that we do not consider further? I mean, that's a question going to the committee. What does the committee think at this point? Is this something to table for a future term, or are we saying that this is something that should be taken institution by institution?
My preference would be this would be something that the Apply Texas Committee does not address, and it would be at the institutional level.
Okay.
Would you like to make that into a motion?
Yes, I would.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign? Okay, that has been discontinued for further consideration. There's a second item, correct? Or was that the second item?
There is one other item, and for those of you that are on the call, I tried to put this a little bit easier and put agenda item E and have new requests separated out. So the materials have agenda item D that has a tech team update, and on the back for you guys here in the room, it's agenda item E, and it should be under new request. What was just discussed was was G, and now we're moving on to H. Sorry, this is so confusing. I'm trying to make it better. But H is a proposal to add a grade received field to the educational information section to facilitate self-reporting of grades. This is a new request from the University of Houston.
I'm not clear. Where is they want to add that?
Yeah, I'm confused because I didn't think that students reported individual courses on their application.
They only report their senior courses, and they don't have grades at that point.
David, were you going to say something?
I believe Michelle's correct. We only collect senior course information, so I assume it's related to those courses where they report those. But I know this came up, I believe, last cycle or the cycle before, looking into adding a self-reporting of grades section that was more than just senior course information.
Okay, thoughts from this committee in regards to the request at hand?
This is, let me just clarify, so this is unique to the four-year application, correct?
Yes, currently.
David is correct. This came up before because a number of schools are starting to look at doing self-reported grades, test scores, et cetera. I think, I was like, this is just my opinion. With considering what we have seen today with the length of our application currently, and if I remember correctly, that was one of the things that made us take heed last time in not pushing this forward, was that this would lengthen the application for students to have to go in and individually input all their grades. It's not a required section as I remember right now. So a lot of students actually skip that entire section. That's just something to consider. Is this a change we want to make at this point in time that could be improved in the next system with drop downs and things like that, making it a lot quicker to complete? I don't know. That's just my thoughts. This is just for discussion. That's not a motion. It's a discussion at this time.
Miguel from UT Austin. I would, yeah, so I mean, as this particular request is written, I don't think there's really a place for any of that there. So it seems like it's kind of a moot point there. As far as an ongoing discussion going forward, self-reported academic record is obviously one of the newer trends. Folks can pay folks to have this done. We manage a number of high school counselor advisory boards across the state, and there's a very mixed response to that when it comes down to, is it really making it more accessible for students to have to input all that information? So I think that's a much larger discussion that doesn't necessarily get included within this, but something that in the future we should address as a committee.
Other discussion?
Okay, so at this time, open for a motion.
Hey, sorry, real quickly. This is Angie at Houston. When we go through all these changes, how does this information get back to the requester as to whether or not we're tabling or why or what the vote is?
That is usually the UT Applied Texas staff addresses everything that moves forward within their administrative suite. But as we've been discussing this process, we're trying to improve upon, because like I said, Miguel mentioned, it would be extremely helpful to have either a summary or someone representing the requester to come either via in person or by phone. To come talk more about these things, because the committee has to make a lot of assumptions about what the request is, or we have to continually go back and ask for information. So as I actually started jotting down how we could probably improve this is that there would be a cycle to keep all of the requests in one spreadsheet, which the UT Applied Texas staff does do currently. But as we knock them off or make those items either completed or choose not to move forward, that there's a cycle back. And that process is not currently, it's been a challenge because we're communicating between two teams, our Apply Texas staff and our coordinating board staff. So I have to work a little bit better with their staff to make sure that notification gets sent out in some way. We'll have to create a new process, essentially. And that might be something that the communication subcommittee can assist us with as well, because that's currently not in place. As we're talking through these things, I know the only way that people are notified is when it comes out in the new cycle, that there's a whole list in the administrative suite of what was completed. We don't ever really get any follow-up that the requester is asking for more information about what their individual request was. So we haven't really gone through that yet, but there is a need to notify. So that's something we have to work on.
Oh, I like that idea of a spreadsheet. I'm wondering if, and for the technical team to think about this with our website, would there be a place, and not necessarily through the admin suite, because not everyone that submits this has admin. I know I have, but not everybody on my campus has it. Somewhere where we could actually have a running list, like you're saying, and then it could show the action taken, so they could actually see, has an action been taken, or is it up for review? I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and that's what I have here. That spreadsheet could probably also identify what action was taken by the committee on what date. That's more transparent. Again, that's really something we need to work on. The other thing is updating the form. David, you mentioned current cycle and next cycle. That probably should be added somewhere to the form itself and to the administrative suite online piece, because that is a very good question that we continually get. There's some other little questions that we could probably ask on there to get more clarification as well.
All right, so it sounds like we're still at a point where a motion needs to be entertained, so we're open to any motions regarding this item.
I'll make a motion.
And that motion is? All motions are not created equal.
I would make a motion to create the Excel file and create that checklist and move it to the subcommittee for communications to create communication for if a request is denied.
That's a great motion, but not the one we need.
It's okay. It's all right. Great team player. You jumped right in there when needed. We appreciate you. So
I don't know if we can even use that as a motion. Can we use it? We don't actually need a motion. I think that's a fantastic endorsement, Jamie.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's all right. You're the real MVP today. A proposal to add a grade received field to the educational information section to facilitate self-reporting of grades requested by the University of Houston.
Okay, I'll try. So I move that I think it will be discontinue this proposal, but pick up in the new cycle after AWS is implemented, a conversation related to grades received.
Very good. Do we have a
Motion to table, correct?
table or discontinue?
It's actually
Table.
Table. Okay.
Okay.
So table. So we're talking about this again. So do we have a second to table this item?
I second.
Okay. Very good. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. This item has been tabled. Rebecca?
I think we have one more.
Oh,
So, yes, David, if you'll go back to the current cycle updates, I believe we needed some further discussion and over the 5th bullet down, the proposal to add an audit that requires applicants to have indicated that they have college credit hours and enter the name of the previous or current institution. So if you want to pick up there.
We discussed this some the last meeting, and I think tabled it in favor of thinking more about it, but there's a question on the education background page that asks applicants if they have college credit hours. And currently, if they indicate yes, this is on the U.S. freshman application, we don't require them to enter the name of an institution, so they could complete the page without entering any college institution details. And this proposal was to require them to enter at least one institution if they indicate they have college credit hours already. And then I think the discussion from there went to credit by testing versus, it went in a number of different directions, and I think we eventually tabled it without coming to a decision on the particular request.
if I remember correctly, I had a bit of conversation this from a community college standpoint. For those of us that have dual credit students that are currently taking courses from our institutions now, St. Philip's being, and then that student graduates, perhaps, and then moves on to their official non-high school related entry into the college and begin to continue their courses, just not as a dual credit student. And so I believe this is one of the items I was discussing. And so the request and context is, from a system standpoint, we needed to create, or would like to create, other opportunities for verifying to ensure that the records remain as clean as possible, so we don't have dual credit students continuing from their dual credit status with the college into a non-dual credit related status with the college, and then we're having to go back in time and find out, well, this student should have actually moved over into paying for their courses, perhaps the non-payment status that we currently offer to our dual credit students. This would aid us a bit. Was there some additional discussion regarding this item?
So, Mordecai, this is Rebecca Griffith. How would this aid you? Maybe I lost track.
No, it's okay. So I remember, at least in my mind, the last time we had this conversation was by asking the student, where did you receive this college credit, could assist in regards to the collection of it. This is what I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that by asking where they're receiving their college credit could essentially aid us in being able to identify from a record standpoint, oh, this student is applying to us for the fall, and let's say they're currently it's in the month of April, they're finishing up their high school dual credit, but now they're applying to come in back to the college as a non-dual credit student. And so this would aid us in being able to take a look and say, hey, we need to keep in mind that this particular student is going to graduate from high school at this point and move on to through our college, but as a non-dual credit, that we were having some implications from a record standpoint of students continuing and buttons perhaps not being pressed, and you have a situation where students that were receiving a dual credit waiver of some kind now moving on to the college and continuing with that dual credit waiver, and they should not be, so that this was aiding in the ability for the college to see dual credit enrolled students who plan to continue through the college, but that there needs to be some systems adjustment that can help us in identifying the student from continuing to receive a waiver, and they should not be.
Oh, okay. So,
So if we look at,
you require students to reapply to your institution after that scenario. That's a little different than I think many of us do. But
Becky, we're having a hard time hearing you. Becky,
okay.
Yeah.
So I was saying that I guess from what Mordecai's saying, they're requiring these students to reapply to their institution at the conclusion of dual credit before they transition to FDIC students. And that's, I think, different than what the majority of places do. But thank you. That helps me to understand what you're doing.
And I have to admit to you as well, we see it as an opportunity for improvement on our end, and it's something that we're taking a serious look at, but if just providing additional context regarding where this came from.
I see. Thank you.
So on this particular item, what we need for clarification at this time is actually we need to make sure that we look at the wording that Dara actually created for us the last time we met. The motion overall to add this was approved, but David wants to make sure that we have checked the wording and that the wording was also approved. So sorry, we were going back in our notes and looking. So this is where we are with the actual wording. You'll see the wording on the update, I believe. I'm not going to trust my notes. Proposed change. Are your college credit hours earned, parentheses, are being earned, close parentheses, good grief, through dual credit, concurrent enrollment, or an early college high school? That's the wording. And then if the answer is yes, the college will become required for students to enter. If the answer is no, it'll just work as it is now. So let me try that again. Are your college credit hours earned, open parentheses, or being earned, close parentheses, through dual credit, concurrent enrollment, or an early college high school, period? Question mark.
It does address. It does address. And so I would make a motion that the proposed change in language be adopted. Oh, okay, so no need for a motion. Boy, I'm butchering it today. All right.
It's a Monday.
So, what additional action needs to happen now?
I think
We're
yeah.
good.
It's just if
Okay.
anyone had any changes, this is your last time to say so.
Okay.
Okay.
I like it. Rebecca, for the fourth time, it's now your turn.
To be fair, every time you've tried to turn it over to me, I've brought something else up. So we have progressed very nicely today, and we are at the point of discussion of potential agenda items for the next meeting. I'm going to take this opportunity to mention that we will need to talk about the Apply Texas workshop at the next meeting. We did have discussion at length about this at our last meeting, and we're looking at some different ideas. For instance, having a technical online workshop that we might have potentially in May-ish or early June. We also talked about potentially moving our workshop away from the TACRO summer meetings and moving it to the Pickle Center in June. TACRO has reached out to me again and asked us to reconsider and would really like us to stay with them. So we are back to considering Friday morning. We had 3 different options that we looked at for agenda that could fit us into a half day. So just keep that in mind. Go back and look at your minutes or your notes from the last session, and let's put this on the agenda for the next session. They said that an April 20th date to get back to them is fine, so we have some time. Other agenda items that we see.
I certainly need to come back to the team and the work of the subcommittee, the communication subcommittee that we're going to put forward regarding the rollout of the new Apply Texas interface and experience. So we'll be formatting that information, as well as perhaps the second item to that would be coming back with the actual email template for discussion regarding the survey. That would be coming forth as well.
And what was the other thing we said? The announcement that would go out, did you say that? I'm sorry, I'm
Yes,
typing.
yes,
Oh, thank you.
yes,
I'm typing and trying to keep up. Okay,
Absolutely.
those two
So for
things.
the Apply Texas piece as well as the survey.
Gotcha.
Both of those communications.
The announcement of the great new changes coming.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Miguel, would you also see a subcommittee a discussion from your side?
Yes, please.
Okay. Add that.
Was there anything that we want to change about you want to wait on? Okay, we'll wait. Thanks.
Back through. Of course, we'll have our standard update from the technical team. And we need a place to discuss any changes that come, or proposals that come in at that point.
So I have really been trying very hard to keep things somewhat in order, and I thought we had it this time, but then all the tech difficulties, but we will get in a better place soon. I'm going to work with the communications team to kind of create that feedback loop. We'll kind of talk through some of that because I do need some additional support. We're low on staffing, and so this has kind of escaped me for the last year or so, but I really been wanting to do this for a long time, and there's a great need for it, so we'll work on that. But I think that's pretty much all we had, right? I did want to say that if there's anyone watching and has a request, please go through the admin suite, and we'll follow up in whatever ways we need to in order to get some of these answered, to come with a more decent proposal to the committee. And we will seek them to come either via conference call or be here present, but we'll work on that because I think it really does need to happen. It's been a little bit difficult to make decisions on some of these things when we don't have all the information, so.
I also want to,
Claudette, this
go ahead,
is
Becky.
Rebecca Griffith again. I just wanted to thank you for that perspective on people that make requests. It's been, I guess I'm in my 21st year of working with Applied Texas, and there used to be a strong feeling, or there has been a continued strong feeling, that you're either on the committee or you're on the outside, that your input as a user, in a way doesn't count very much unless you've got an inroad to somebody that's on the committee. So I really appreciate that willingness to say, yes, those suggestions can be actionable, and yes, the people making the suggestion can represent themselves.
Yes, I'm excited for that process because it's been a slow going, but we've improved a little bit every year. I mean, Jane Caldwell, who was overseeing the committee, had put in place that page to start collecting that, and so I think we've come a long way in these last couple of years, but we still need to improve. And so any other ideas or thoughts? You guys have had some good ideas today about communication plans. Please send them to Mordecai, myself, the subcommittee, communication subcommittee. We're more than happy to kind of explore ways to do that.
I also want to take a moment, Claudette, to thank you and your staff and the coordinating board staff and, of course, the technical team. This has been a Monday, and Mondays happen every now and then, but you guys are wonderful, so don't let this actually be a hiccup. Those of you that tune in all the time and those of us on the committee know that this runs like clockwork, and we can't help some technical issues now and then, so thank you all for everything that you do to support this committee, for not only the support of the committee members, but also for the state of Texas.
Thank you all for your patience. We appreciate it.
Any final discussion? Then I am happy to announce the adjournment of the advisory meeting for Applied Texas at a much earlier time than I expected. So thank you all for your attendance. The next meeting is April 20th. We will be here in Austin at the coordinating board and also online. The meeting time begins at 9 a.m. So we look forward to seeing you all back then. Safe travels for those here. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Bye.